Hello, Bernhard.
Hi, Carsten. So what are we up to in this video series?
We are installing a scale-out file server on
Mm-hmm.
a virtual storage spaces direct system.
Mm-hmm.
We do that because in our Azure Virtual Desktop series, we
Mm-hmm.
want to use FS Logic, and FS Logic use user profile disks. And the user profile disks are stored on a file share. And it would be
Mm-hmm.
nice to have a high available solution here that you are not depending on one file server or one machine. So
Mm-hmm.
storage spaces direct with a scale out file server would be a nice solution.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I prepared already two machines,
Yeah.
but you had a question or a
So this
remark.
is, this is a guest cluster concept, right? That you are doing. So you're using
Ye-
HCI as underlying platform, as the hypervisor platform, and are putting a resilient guest cluster based in virtual machines on top of it, which
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
hosting the the storage spaces
Yeah.
direct.
Yeah, you could also buy two hardware nodes
Mm-hmm.
for this purpose, but of course it's a bit expensive. You have to use the data center edition of Windows Server
Mm-hmm.
2022, for example, and 16 cores. Um, but you have to in virtual machines, if you have it on data center, they are already licensed. And I
Mm-hmm.
have a customer who has some hundred users on such a two-node virtual cluster. So it's
Mm-hmm.
quite performant, and we can really use it. It's a nice solution. But of course,
Okay.
you can do it with hardware.
Okay, I have one question, but I'll park it because I think we may have some time to bridge, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
So what I have done, I prepared already two virtual machines, and
mhm,
let's look into the settings of these virtual machines.
mhm,
See here, they have 32 gigabytes of memory.
mhm,
They have 6 virtual cores, and of course, they could have more. They could have more memory. Yeah, but it's
okay,
it's just an example.
mhm,
And then I have my operating disk. There is a Windows Server 2022 Data
mhm,
Center Edition installed. I used the eval edition because this setup will not survive the next 180 days. So
mhm.
the eval is
I-
fine.
Is it
Yeah.
is it required to use data center, or could you have chosen standard edition as well for that
Yeah.
role?
No, not for this, not for storage spaces direct, because the
Mhm.
storage spaces direct feature is only available in data center. So we have to
Okay.
use data center. Yeah.
Mhm,
Then I added a number of virtual disks, yeah, Hyper-V virtual disks, and I chose 10 here. That's
mhm,
only because my script creates 10 virtual disks. You can go with 4. That
mhm,
would be completely fine. So 4 or more would be fine, and they are performant enough. So you see, they are also here in the virtual machine directory.
mhm.
And then I
Okay.
have, and this here I have 3 network cards, one in the management network and 2 SMB adapters. This is a storage spaces direct cluster. Like an Azure Stack HCI cluster, you should have separate storage adapters because they have to copy over every change that is made on one server to the other server because we want a high available solution, right?
Mhm,
So of this, I have two machines. You see node 1, node 2, and I already opened the two virtual machines here.
mhm,
So you see they are in the domain. They have the network cards have IP configurations there. I
mhm,
installed the updates and I took the liberty to already install um, to one role and one feature.
mhm,
So here we look at it. I installed the file server role
mhm. Yeah.
because we want to have a high available file server, right?
Mhm. Get it.
And I also installed the failover cluster feature.
Mhm,
Yeah. If we would use, so other way, it is possible in Hyper-V and Azure Stack HCI if you have RDMA enabled network cards on your Hyper-V switches. You could also use RDMA in virtual machines. So if you do that, you maybe have to add data center bridging. But in this example, we will not use RDMA in the VMs. We just, because not every customer has RDMA enabled cards, we just go with TCP/IP for storage spaces direct. So I will cancel this, and everything is set up. They're on the domain. So first we have to do our cluster test. Yeah? And for that, we go to, oh, that's the wrong one. I have to choose this one here. We go to the failover cluster manager, and we go to validate configuration. We have some information here. Yeah, you can ask if you want.
Yeah, so I mean, it's for the audience, right? So we did that exercise in a different series, which is about setting up the Azure Stack HCI host system, the underneath physical hardware, right? We talked a little bit about more in depth there. So Carsten is doing the fast run on this. But
Exactly.
if you're new to this series, it's valid, or it's a very important thing to check for the to do that validation first, right? Because you won't get support from Microsoft in case anything goes wrong. And if you have any red flags on your validation visit, and it's always good to have some sort of information and before, because a lot of
You're completely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to, you can tell our customer, our audience more, but I want to look
Yep.
at this point again, because not everyone will look at the series we done before. The tests we want to do, usually all tests we want to do, but unfortunately all tests is not storage spaces direct. So you have to choose run only tests I select, and here you see storage spaces direct is not ticked. So we have to tick this, and we can get rid of storage, and then we let our validation run. Yeah? So this is
Right. So
very important. Don't forget it. Otherwise, the storage spaces direct part will not be tested. And if you have errors there, wouldn't be good.
yeah, the difference is, I mean, you have the disks attached to each virtual machine individually, right? And the test that was ticked would have, been the correct one if the disks would be shared amongst the two virtual machines, which is not the case in our setup. So yeah, it's just selecting the right option for the setup you have.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about the S2D in virtual machine, the scale-out file server. The nice thing of the solution is we have a VM with some disks, and you can just backup it like every other VM because it has only local attached disks. If you would choose a file server with shared storage, for example, with VHD sets or with a SAN over iSCSI, we can't use the change block tracking in backup. Because it's not able to use SAN storage. Yeah, in this scenario. So, but the test is finished, and let's have a look at the report. Complete successful and suitable for clustering. So you can look in allow block content. So you see here we have a really nice test. Everything is green. Yeah? So we can go on with our cluster creation. And you see here there's a little check box. If we use that, create the cluster now using the validated nodes, we will do that. So we get into the cluster creation wizard. And here we have to give it a name, S2D1 cluster. And maybe we have this account already, so I have to delete it or to disable it. I will do that, but first I have to give it an IP address. So if I go to next, and he will find an S2D1 cluster account, and I'm pretty sure it will. Yeah, there it is. I just fix it. Here's my domain controller. Let's go here. And here's our cluster. I will delete the object because I want to show you something else. I could also disable the object. That would be fine. But I on purpose delete it because there is some important information we will show you later.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
now I do it again. It should not find the object, and it says, I'm good to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can leave this. There is no storage to add because we don't have storage yet. We don't have volumes that could be included in the cluster. So we will have a cluster after the cluster creation wizard without any storage. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if the cluster is there, we have to do some maintenance or some additional tasks, and then we will add the storage. Okay, we have again a report. We can look at the report, but I know it's fine. So let's
Mm-hmm.
finish it.
Yep.
And here's our cluster.
Okay.
So
now the housekeeping stuff, right? Or what we call
exactly,
housekeeping, right?
exactly. The cluster doesn't have a witness, for example. It's a two-node cluster. It should have a witness.
Mm-hmm.
In our Azure Stack HCI series, we chose a cloud witness. So in this small video series, we will go for a file share witness. So I go here, more, configure cluster quorum settings.
Mm-hmm.
Next, select the quorum witness. So we want to specify one. And then we have three options: configure disk witness, configure file share witness, and configure a cloud witness.
Mm-hmm.
Cloud witness we did in the Azure Stack HCI series. File share witness we will do. And a disk witness is not supported in an S2D scenario or in an Azure Stack HCI scenario. So this
Mm-hmm.
option is not allowed. But unfortunately, failover cluster manager is kind of
Offering
it's
it.
finished of developing. There is no change anymore. So the product group couldn't take it out here for if it recognizes as an S2D cluster.
Okay.
So we have to go with this one. And then I have a special server for this. In my course, it's PK support. We have an S2D support share, and here is a file share witness
Mm-hmm. Okay.
share. So we will specify that, and it will set it. And now our cluster has a file share witness.
Okay, so the idea is if one node cannot reach to the other, they at least should be able to go to the file share and check who should be owning the resources, right?
Yeah, do we have a majority of nodes left and file share? So what should the node do? Should he start the service or shut it down, and so on? So we set the file share witness. Then there's something I always do that's pure. Yeah, it's not mandatory, but I like it.
Cosmetics.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
cosmetic. I rename the network adapters. I can do that very fast. SMB1. And please look at the Azure Stack HCI installation series. There we talk really why we do that. Yeah. So important with an S2D cluster, that is a file server. The scale-out file server can only communicate to external resources when the cluster and client is set. So in our scenario, only the management interface can be used for incoming and outgoing traffic outside of the cluster. That would be our user profile disk, can only use that network. We have two more network cards here, and if you want to use them also, so you have to add also cards to your clients that can use this network, and then you have to enable cluster and client here. Otherwise, it will only use this one because it's only allowed. Yeah? Okay, now we have our cluster. No, yes, we have our cluster.
Yep.
We have our witness, and now it's time to enable storage spaces direct. So I do that with PowerShell.
As you like. I mean,
Of course, I love PowerShell. You know that. So we will increase the font a bit. Otherwise, you can't see anything. And enable cluster S2D is the command for that. And we do a verbose. Again, in the Azure Stack HCI installation series, you will get more information about this, what it does, and so on. Here we just let it run. It will install Storage Spaces Direct for us. And then we can use these 10 additional virtual disks in every of the 2 nodes to build a high available storage. So in the next step, we will create 2 volumes, and then we can install our scale-out file server role, and then we will create shares. So and then we have our high available. We have to do something with permissions. Yeah. I was voting for everyone permissions, but Bernhard was really against it. So we will do some nicer permissions. Okay. I think our cluster is here. Yeah, there is, of course, again, a report we can look at, but what we see here, everything is fine. Required step for this action, we're completely successful. So we now have our cluster. So next would be creating volumes. And creating volumes we can do with PowerShell, and we can do with Windows Admin Center. So now is the time to add our node to Windows Admin Center. Here we have our Windows Admin Center. And if you watch the other series, you know we have our Azure Stack HCI cluster in here. And now I will add another cluster. And the cluster we just created, the S2D1 cluster. It should find 2 machines. Here they are. I do add. And I click on the cluster. It will now recognize that it is a Storage Spaces Direct cluster. So we have disks. No. Disks and nodes. That's not correct. He doesn't does he recognize it? Does he recognize it? We should have volumes here. So we don't have volumes here. This is a thing we talked in our Azure Stack HCI series. He didn't recognize it really as a Storage Spaces Direct cluster. So maybe we
see if there is any let's see if there is any update to this one that you need to do.
No, there isn't. I think it's quite updated. So I think everything is fine, and this is a problem we have. So we will finish here. I will fix it, and in the next video we will continue with the installation.
Okay.